And last time we did The Tempest, which was a kind of introduction also to this whole series we're doing this year. So tis online now as a YouTube video, so if you missed it, you'll be able to look at that. But during that I went through some of the wisdom traditions that lie behind the plays, particularly those, of course, that are shown in The Tempest. And Sarah, you did?
I did the mystery schools.
You did the mystery schools. So together we're doing a sort of double presentation. We're playing the Gemini role, which underlies the whole of the Shakespeare plays, actually carries behind it the symbolism of the Gemini of opposites, comparing opposites, one with another. So you've always got the contrast, and then the magic is made by the relationship between the two. Or the quarrel, the fight is made. You know, so it's either a fight or it's a love making or something like that. So it seems to be a law of life which Shakespeare's grasped hold of, and he uses it in his plays and also in all the productions, the printed productions. They're always signposts with the symbol of the Gemini as headpieces and so on like that. And also it's interesting, the word Shakespeare is also connected with the spear shakers in mythology, and the Gemini were known as the spear shakers. So you've got that lovely symbolic link through what Shakespeare chose to use. I mean, he really used the wisdom of the ancients, you know, sort of traditional wisdom. It's always said by the great teachers, and it comes out in the Bible, you know, with Jesus saying, you know, the great commandments are two. Love God, love one another. It's always there too. Love the immortal, love the mortal, which is the Gemini secret. So all the plays that I've looked at anyway are about this exploration in how do we get it right between opposites? How do we relate to each other? You know, how do we build up a good relationship that works, that's successful, that's loving, that's good, and what happens if we get it wrong, you know, and what are the mistakes to look out for, which I think is what the tragedies are about. So anyway, today for our second one we've chosen Love's Labour's Lost, and it's an early play of Shakespeare's, and for some people they find it too challenging because it is a complex play. And when it's acted well, it's brilliant. But if the actors are not quite good enough at it, it can be ghastly. But I think it's a fantastic play, and it holds a lot of what I call the mysteries in it, but in a much more cryptic way than some of the other plays. So I'm going to start with an introduction to it. And try and show some of the things I found in it, which I think are interesting to do with the wisdom. And Sarah, you're going to follow on with
about the male-female polarities.
Great.
How Shakespeare treats them.
Okay, so Love's Labour's Lost. Well, just a bit of the background first. It's first published in quarto in 1598. And the title then of the quarto is a pleasant, conceited comedy called Love's Labour's Lost. And the first official record of it is actually that quarto, because the play was never entered in the Stationer's Register, which was normally done, but this play wasn't. And it's the first Shakespeare play to be published with the name of Shakespeare on it, and it's printed as W. Shakespeare with the spear part spelled S-P-E-R-E. W full stop Shakespeare. So the spelling of Shakespeare was done in several different ways on the published play, on the printed page. The first recorded performance, according to the quarto title page, was performed at court for Queen Elizabeth sometime over Christmas 1597. And just to read what it says on the quarto, as it was presented before Her Highness this last Christmas, newly corrected and augmented by W. Shakespeare, imprinted at London by W. for Cuthbert Burby, 1598. So that gives an indication that what was presented before the Queen was actually a newly corrected and augmented version of a play that existed earlier. So that begs the question of, when was it written, where was it first performed, which presumably was privately in some way because it wasn't a public performance. Well, it's really interesting. I've researched this, others have researched it, but Love's Labour's Lost is alluded to as if already written in the Gray's Inn Revels of 1594 to 1595, and called The Prince of Purpoole and the Order of the Knights of the Helmet. And moreover, the play contains many of the themes portrayed in the revels. Like the Comedy of Errors written for these revels, Love's Labour's Lost also seems, to my mind anyway, to have been written for the same revels, wherein the lawyers would enjoy the intellectual witticisms and quick repartee, and understand the allusions and the legal terms which come all the way through the play, like many of the plays. It was probably due to be performed on one of the revelry days that was cancelled, because it fits so well with the whole theme of the revels, and the Comedy of Errors that goes with it as well. It's on a whole theme of chaos, society in chaos, and then order had to be brought to that. So that was the theme of the revels. The other thing that, besides that theme, the other thing that's greatly influenced the play Love's Labour's Lost is the Commedia dell'arte. And so a lot of all the comic parts are really based on how the Commedia dell'arte performed. That's the Italian company that at that time was only performing in France and Italy. So someone who had a big input on that play had obviously witnessed firsthand the Commedia dell'arte and learned from it and brought that experience into the play. And so when it's acted well, it's brilliant. It is. You've got all the four characters of the Commedia dell'arte actually being played out in some of the characters of the play. Now, one of the major characters of the play, who creates most of the laughs, or a lot of the laughs, is the character of Don Adriano de Armado, who's called a fantastical Spaniard. Well, his character is actually based on a real historical person alive at that time in England. And his name was Antonio Perry, the King of Spain's former Secretary of State, who defected to England in 1593 and was befriended and looked after by Essex and Anthony Bacon and assisted them in their intelligence operations. And a great deal of the wit and style of expression used in Love's Labour's Lost is a parody of Perez's very extravagant and convoluted way of expressing himself. So if you're in the know about that man, Perez, you would laugh. Your sides were aching, because it's got into a T, really. And I've read some of Perez's writings, own writings, and he writes in the same way that he obviously spoke in the same way, and this play has got it. But he's an interesting man. He was a humanist scholar who had translated Homer's Odyssey from Greek into Spanish. The Spanish letters and aphorisms, which Anthony Bacon copied out for himself and his friends, were in great demand in England. He was admired by the Essex circle, the Earl of Essex and his circle, for his knowledge of Tacitism. And whilst he was in London, Perry wrote a best-selling book called Pecado de Historia a Relaciones, which means Pieces of History and Relationships, under the assumed name of Raphael Peregrino, which was published in 1594 by Richard Field and dedicated to Essex. And some stories in this were contributed by Anthony Bacon, because Anthony Bacon was also a great wanderer through Europe on intelligence matters. And supplying the Queen with intelligence. And this was translated into English by Arthur Atty, one of Essex's secretaries, then edited by Anthony Bacon, and published under the title Pieces of the Story or Relations, so called by the Peregrini and their authors. And the word peregrinate, is constantly used in Perez's letters, in ironic reference to his own travels and misfortunes, and himself as El Peregrino, hence his surname, which is Raphael Peregrino. And this word, peregrinate, meaning to travel from place to place, was firmly introduced into the English language as a new word via Love's Labour's Lost, which you'll find in Act 5, Scene 1. He's too picked, too spruce, too affected, too odd, as it were, to peregrinate, which is actually describing Perez himself. It's really, really nice. And Perry was a guest of Francis Bacon on the famous Night of Errors at Gray's Inn on the first grand night of the 1594-5 Gray's Inn Revels, when the Comedy of Errors was performed. And these, to my mind, were the revels for which Love's Labour's Lost would also appear to have been written, and which is alluded to in various places in the revels. So I'll say a little bit about these revels, because it helps to understand the play, I think. The revels were called the Prince of Purpoole and the Order of the Knights of the Helmet. And the revels, which acted out the reign of a mock prince, the Lord of Misrule, because it takes place over Christmas, complete with imitation Privy Council and officers of state, continued intermittently from 20th December 1594 until Shrove Tuesday, 4th of March 1595. Long time, but it didn't go on every day. But these revels included a performance of the Shakespeare play Comedy of Errors on the 28th of December, the first grand night, at the end of which the evening revels concluded with a masque of the return of knights from a campaign in Russia against Negro Tartars. Then a masque called the Honourable Order of the Knights of the Helmet, written by Francis Bacon, was given on the second grand night, the 3rd of January 1595. And a procession by the lawyers up the Thames in a pageant on the 1st of February, the pageant in pretence of the prince and his knights returning from a campaign in Russia against Negro Tartars, in which the Prince of Purpoole declared that he was only prevented from paying his respects to the Queen by the fact that his body, by length of my journey and my sickness at sea, is so weakened. And then the revels later on almost concluded with, or did conclude with, a performance by the lawyers before the Queen at Whitehall of the Masque of Proteus on Shrove Tuesday, 4th of March 1595. And they were very, very celebrated, these revels, and as being particularly good, fantastic. But in terms of Love's Labour's Lost, there are allusions in it to the Knights of the Helmet. So let me list them a bit. Love's Labour's Lost appears to be alluded to by the 6th counsellor in the Honourable Order of the Knights of the Helmet masque. And Barone's speech in Love's Labour's Lost echoes that of the 6th counsellor in the Honourable Order of the Knights of the Helmet. The masque of the Russians with their blackamoors in Love's Labour's Lost, Act 5, Scene 2, echoes the pageant of the Prince of Purpoole and his knights returning from Russia with Negro Tartars in the Gray's Inn Revels. Then the stage direction in Love's Labour's Lost for the entrance of the Russians begins with Enter Blackamoors with Music, which is a reflection of the Negro Tartars. Then we have Rosalind's Jibe, Why look you pale? Seasick, I think, coming from Muscovy, echoes the excuse made by the Prince of Purpoole, who on his return from the mock visit to Russia wrote a letter to the Queen excusing himself from attending on Her Majesty that day because of his exhaustion by length of my journey and my sickness at sea. And the Prince says, in Love's Labour's Lost, alludes to the 4 men of Navarre's academy as a mess of Russians. And the word mess refers to the practice of the Inns Court of dining in messes of 4 persons. And it gives you a little key as to why there are 4 people in Navarre's academy and why it's men only. And you can see Shakespeare's pretty fed up with this men only thing in this play. So, in the Honourable Order of the Knights of the Helmet, written by Francis Bacon, the knights had to vow to keep 19 articles, full of Baconian philosophy and precepts, including vows to defend God and the state, to attack ignorance, to defend truth and virtue ceaselessly and secretly. Then after a speech by the prince, the 6 councillors deliver a speech each, addressing the Prince of Purple and extolling the virtues of certain things. The first councillor extolling the virtues of the exercise of war against vice and ignorance. The second councillor, the study of philosophy, including the collecting of a perfect library, the making of a spacious botanical, zoological garden, museum, and a laboratory or palace fit for a philosopher's stone. The third councillor, extolling the acquisition of eternizement and fame. The acquisition of eternizement and fame by buildings and foundations. The fourth councillor extolled the virtues of the absoluteness of state and treasure. The fifth councillor extolled the exercise of virtue and gracious government. And the sixth councillor came along and pooh-poohed the lot and recommended the prince pursued the exercise of joyful pastimes and sports. And it's the sixth councillor that alludes to the play of Love's Labour's Lost. So I'm going to read you a little bit of the speech. When I heard, most excellent prince, the 3 first of my lords, so careful to continue your fame and memory, methought it was as if a man should come to some young prince as yourself is, and immediately after his coronation be in hand with him to make himself a sumptuous and stately tomb, and to speak out of my soul, I muse how any of your servants can once endure to think of you as a prince past. And for my other lords, who would engage you as deeply in matters of state, the one persuading you to a more absolute, the other to a more gracious government, I assure your excellency their lessons were so cumbersome as if they would make you a king in a play, who, when one could think he standeth in great majesty and felicity, is troubled to say his part. What? Nothing but tasks, nothing but working days, no feasting, no music, no dancing, no triumphs, no comedies, no love, no ladies. Let other men's lives be as pilgrimages, because they are tied to divers necessities and duties, but princes' lives are as progresses, dedicated only to variety and solace. And so he goes on in that theme. But there you got a very good reference to the whole theme of the Love's Labour's Lost as a play that seems to have existed. So probably it had been written initially for those revels, but there were certain days that were going to be done that were cancelled in those revels, so that play probably belonged to one of those days. So it wasn't performed. So when it was later performed, it was done before the Queen, at least publicly done before the Queen. But to really get underneath what it's about, it's very good to know what the revels were about and what it's dealing with. It's dealing with the idea of chaos and overdone intellectual thoughts and, sort of playing with thoughts, and not a real serious study of truth, which is what really the Academy was meant to be about. In Love's Labour's Lost, Navarre's Academy it's made clear that the aim of it, which Navarre says, is to know which else we should not know. Which is obvious, isn't it? We want to know something we don't know. So we want to find out more and more, and of course the great search is really to find out the truth. What is true? There are various, you could say there are various models for this academy. Well, the first model is Gray's Inn itself and the other inns of court, where the lawyers met for meals in messes of four, and women weren't allowed in the court because all lawyers were male at that time. But they were allowed in on festive occasions like the revels, but on special invitation. Otherwise, women were banned. So it's well known the lawyers, to find their recreation, had to go across the river and find their wenches there. But the other model was where you get the name from, Henry, which is Henry of Navarre. And he became Henry IV of France in the end. But to start with, he was Henry of Navarre, and he started an academy in his kingdom of Berne in the south of France, in the Pyrenees area. And his court was sometimes at Pau, the capital, and at other times at Nérac, the capital of the Pays d'Albret, or at Arguin, or less frequently at Montauban. And the academy was mainly at Nérac. And it was founded in 1583. And it's, in a sense, it's modelled on what Henry III was doing, or had done in Paris, where he founded the Royal Academy there. And Navarre's academy was visited by Anthony Bacon in early July 1584, and he stayed at Navarre's court with Henry and his sister Catherine de Bourbon throughout the summer of 1584, and he and Henry became good friends. And then there's also another episode that is written, and Navarre, but Navarre's academy was nothing like what Love's Labour's Lost is, because Navarre was a great womanizer. He adored women, so they were certainly not excluded. So, you could see Love's Labour's Lost as this kind of parody of Navarre's academy, which was totally the opposite, really. And in fact, his sister was a famous, very, very intelligent woman, and very, very famous for her writings and so on. But earlier on, there was a visit of the Princess of France, Marguerite de Valois, and her mother, Catherine de Medici, plus very attractive attendant ladies, to Navarre's court at Nérac in 1578, which was partly to discuss the question of Marguerite de Valois' dowry and the province of Aquitaine. And that comes into Love's Labour's Lost, that visit of the princess and queen with her beauties in attendance, who actually had been trained to seduce men. That was their politics at the time. Apparently it was very successful. And Navarre fell for it. And I think Marguerite de Valois got what she wanted. Anyway, it's a nice thing built into this play, So people there who were watching it, obviously they would have known these things. That they would understand it. They would have, they would have found it very funny, I think. Then there's also another academy written about it, an invented one, called the French Academy, or l'Académie Française. And this was supposedly written by Pierre de la Primado. And the book was published in French in 1577 and translated into English in 1586. And this tells of the 4 gentlemen of Anjou who were tutored by a master, and that was an all-male only academy. But interestingly, this book, L'Académie Française, had to be read by the Knights of the Helmet in Bacon's Masque of the Knights of the Helmet. It's something they had to read and know. So it gives a little bit of background to the play, which I think is quite helpful to understanding it, because it's a very, I think it's one of the most complex of all the Shakespeare plays. And this very fast repartee and witticism and hidden legal terms and so on. So you've got to be very alert to know what's going on and see how all these comparisons are made, because if you know the play, one character will say something using a word, and the next character will change the meaning of that word to another meaning, or substitute a different word for it, and so on. So it's very, very cleverly done. But most of all, the play satirises all male societies and an intellectualism that shuts itself away from life, showing that truth, it shows in the end that truth is actually love, such as can be seen in a woman's eye, or to be experienced in their company, or to be practiced as charity. So this really is the main theme of the play. So it's a satire on this all-male stuff. And you include Freemasonry in this, because that was alive and well at the time, and developed right up to now. And in fact, there are a lot of Freemasonic allusions in the play, and key words which are Freemasonic. So there's no doubt it's aimed at Freemasons as well. But anyway, in the play, once the men have succumbed to the company of women and fallen in love, at the play's end they're given tasks to do by the women so as to prove their love. Ah, yes.
That was very male.
Well, I think it saved them, didn't it, really? Rosalind's charge to Barone at the end of the play actually sums up really what whole truth is about, and that's charity. The task given to Barone by Rosalind, it contains the essence of the whole teaching. He asked her to impose some service on me for my love, and she tasks him with performing a challenging labour of love in hospitals. And it is challenging. So I'm going to just read a little bit of what they say to each other. Barone, studies, my lady? Mistress, look on me. Behold the window of my heart, mine eye. What humble suit attends thy answer there? Impose some service on me for thy love. Rosalind, oft have I heard of you, my Lord Baron, before I saw you, and the world's large tongue proclaims you for a man replete with mocks, full of comparisons and wounding flouts, which you on all estates will execute that lie within the mercy of your wit. To weed this wormwood from your fruitful brain, and wherewithal to win me, if you please, without the which I am not to be won, you shall this 12-month term from day to day visit the speechless sick, and still converse with groaning wretches, and your task shall be, with all the fierce endeavour of your wit, to enforce the pained impotent to smile. That's a huge work of charity, isn't it? And it's interesting, she really gives a clue to what it's all about, and her name is Rosalind, or Rosaline. And it comes from a word it's made of two words, rose and lin, which means rose water or beautiful rose. So she's a real key in all this, just as Barone is a key for the men. And what they're really searching for, what everyone is really searching for, is the truth. So all the academies were initially set up to search for the truth. The laws of the universe, or whatever you call them. Well, in mythology, truth is known as the daughter of time. Time being symbolised by Saturn, or by Pan, or in Greek mythology by Kronos. So truth is the daughter of time. Well, in the Roman mythology, the Latin mythology, she's Venus. Truth is Venus, the goddess Venus. She's also known as Veritas, which literally means truth. She was born of sea foam, which is a mixture of Saturn's, Uranus, a seaman, scattered by Saturn into the sea. So the sea is the mother, and Saturn is said to be the father. So she's the daughter of time. She equates in the Greek terms to Aphrodite, who also was born in the same way. She is born of the foam of the sea after Kronos castrated his father Uranus, and his blood fell to the sea. Now Venus's special emblem is the rose. And Venus's children by Mars are Cupid, which means love, and Concordia, which means harmony. So you can see where the play is getting to, can't you? You know, all the men wanted to search for truth, but they wanted to beguile women. But it's a woman, it's a symbol of truth. You know, wow. Yeah, you see what Shakespeare's trying to say. Oh, he's brilliant, really. Well, truth is, it's called the lost, love's labour's lost. So what's lost got to do with it? Well, truth is known in Freemasonry, which was then a men-only thing. It was known as the lost word. They lost it. Interesting, isn't it? Because they barred women. So it refers to what they called in Freemasons the lost word of God that Freemasons seek. And this is the word, the logos, the creative nature and organising principle of God, which is also known as love, otherwise known to the Greeks as eros, the firstborn and the logos, or to the Romans as Cupid. As Francis Bacon pointed out, this love is actually love in action. It's creative, it's active, all the time. And in the Bible, he picked out the quote for this from Ecclesiastes, the work that God worketh from the beginning to the end. The whole quote is from Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11. He has made everything appropriate in its time, he being God. He has also set eternity in their heart, so that man will not find out the work which God has done from the beginning even to the end. That's a bit depressing, really. It means we can search and search for truth, we'll never fully find it. I guess because it's infinite. And this labour, this work of love is the labour of love. Labour of love which has been lost. It's not being performed, not being looked for. So as Bacon pointed out, and of course which Jesus pointed out first, is our imitation of this as being all born in God's image or likeness is love in action, which is charity or philanthropy. Those are the two main words used for it. All the time, in everything we do. And charity and philanthropy is the means by which we will eventually come to know the lost word, which is love, which is truth. So you see, all this very, very profound teaching is right there in the play. And Shakespeare always goes to the Bible. You know, virtually all the plays are commentaries on things you find in the Bible, all that he's observed, and which he's observed in human nature. You know, and how do we get there to the real truth? We've got to recognise it first. We've got to see it. We don't see it, we don't recognise it, we will never find it. And actually it's in our face. It's there all around us all the time. But we don't see it. This is really what this play is pointing out, I think, so much. It also brings up another fellowship that was alive at the time, which was actually created or founded in Queen Elizabeth I's time, and that's the Rosicrucians, the fraternity of the Rosy Cross. So in a kind of way, the King of Navarre and his three male friends parody Father Rosicross and his three friends, who together found the fraternity of the Rosy Cross, as described in the early 17th century Rosicrucian manifesto Fama Fraternitatis RC, meaning the fame of the fraternity of the Rosy Cross. And for instance, it says in that manifesto, after this manner began the fraternity of the Rosy Cross, first by 4 persons only, and by them was made the magical language and writing, with a large dictionary, which we yet daily use to God's praise and glory, and to find great wisdom therein. They made also the first part of the book M. So the Rosicrucian fraternity was founded in 1570-71 in England, according to Michael Meyer, and as a renovation of older wisdom societies that have been going on through Europe for a long period of time. But it was specially founded under that name in England in 1570. So it was alive and well when this play was written and performed. It existed, and I expect a lot of people who saw this play, experienced it, were members of that fraternity. Or maybe also contributed to its writing. Love's Labour's Lost refers to this. I'm just going to read the beginning of it, where Ferdinand speaks, and this is the beginning of the play. Let fame, that all hunt after in their lives, live registered upon our brazen tombs, and then grace us in the disgrace of death. When, spite of cormorant devouring time, the endeavour of this present breath may buy that honour which shall bait his scythe's keen edge, and make us heirs of all eternity. Therefore, brave conquerors, for so you are, at war against your own affections, and the huge army of the world's desires, our late edict shall strongly stand in force. Navarre shall be the wonder of the world. Our court shall be a little academy, still and contemplated in living art. You 3, Barone, Domain and Longueville, have sworn for 3 years' term to live with me, my fellow scholars, and to keep those statutes that are recorded in this schedule here. Your oaths are passed, and now subscribe your names, that his own hand may strike his honour down that violates the smallest branch herein. If you are armed to do as sworn to do, subscribe to your deep oaths and keep it too. Well, they got the idea of the 4 founders of the academy, like in the fraternity, the 4 founders, and this idea of fame. But Ferdinand's idea of fame is totally different to that of the Rosicrucians. He's after honour and people to remember, because his name's written on a big fancy tomb, and after he's died, so he's going to be famous for eternity because of that. And then, you've got to make war, he's telling his fellow men, make war against your own affections and the huge army of the world's desires. Well, eros, love, is basically desire. Desire to do the right things, desire to do good, desire to love. Affection, desire. And there's Ferdinand saying, don't want any of that. Don't want women, don't want love, don't want desires or affections of any sort. Wow, what a parody it is, isn't it? Oh dear. And searches to know the truth, really. Now, just going to mention 1 or 2 more things in the play. What comes up a lot is the I. The I, if you know the play, you must have noticed how many times. It actually is mentioned 72 times in Love's Labour's Lost. 72 times. Now, as you get to know the Shakespeare plays, you find they're full of very cryptic references that have to do with numerology and other things like that. So he's using, the wisdom traditions in this way as well. So 72, for instance, is the 72 names of God. There are 72 names of God. There are 72 letters in the great name of God, it's said. There were 72 members of the Great Council, which are known as to the Jews of the Sanhedrin. were 72 total disciples of Jesus. As well as the 12, there were the 72. And so on and so on. 72 is one of the key numbers used in sacred tradition. It's been used for centuries, for millennia. So why I? Why is I so important? 72 mentions of I, which from this comparison relate to the 72 names of God, or 72 disciples, 72 eyes. To say 72 different ways of seeing maybe. Well, the thing about when you know the truth is called revelation. And revelation is to do with seeing. You become the great seer. You see the truth and you know the truth. In fact, there are different stages to it. First of all, you've got to feel, and then you've got to hear. Feel and hear the truth. You hear the inner voice, or you hear the sound of nature too. You have to have a sense and empathy, a feeling for it. And then that hearing produces the seeing. Our mind, our soul immediately wants to see, because that's the great faculty of the soul. The mind is to see what we're hearing, what we're feeling. And you see it, and then you try to understand it, you think about it. But to really prove, if you think you've got your understanding right, to really prove it, you've got to put it into action. You've got to test it out, put it into action. And once if you're seeing the truth, you're seeing love, or an aspect of that love. Put it into action, prove it, and then you know it's love. And then you see in the final way, which is the revelation. And then you say, I see. I see. I really do see. I know. Well, it's interesting, in these 72 eyes in Love's Labour's Lost, the very first one comes in eyesight, right near the beginning of the play, and it's mentioned by Barone. And then he mentions another 4 instances of eyes as well. But I don't have time. I'll read this out because it's rather lovely. This comes in Act 1, Scene 1. Why, all delights are vain, but that most vain, which with pain purchased, doth inherit pain, as painfully to pore upon a book, to seek the light of truth, while truth the while doth falsely blind the eyesight of his look. Light seeing light doth light of light beguile, so ere you find where light in darkness lies, your light grows dark by losing of your eyes. Study me how to please the eye indeed, by fixing it upon a fairer eye, who dazzling so, that eye shall be his heed, and give him light that it was blinded by. Study is like the heaven's glorious sun, that will not be deep searched with saucy looks. Small have continual plodders ever won, save base authority from others' books. These earthly godfathers of heaven's lights, that give a name to every fixed star, have no more profit of their shining nights than those that walk and wot not what they are. Too much to know is to know naught but fame, and every godfather can give a name. So here you've got the first mentioning of the eyes, and it's blind. They're not seeing. They're not seeing the true light. It's a wonderful start. Then you can compare it with a bit further on, with the very famous speech of Barone. And this covers the 42nd to the 50th eye. Have at you then, affection's men-at-arms, consider what you first did swear unto, to fast, to study, and to see no woman, flat treason gainst the kingly state of youth. Say, can you fast? The stomachs are too young, and abstinence engenders maladies. And where that you have vowed to study, lords, in that each of you have forsworn his book, can you still dream and pore and thereon look? For when would you, my lord, or you, have found the ground of study's excellence without the beauty of a woman's face? From women's eyes, this doctrine I derive. They are the ground, the books, the academies, from whence doth spring the true Promethean fire. And then he goes on and on with this beautiful poetry. And then later on in that same speech, he kind of repeats what he just said, but in a deeper way. From women's eyes this doctrine I derive. They sparkle still the right Promethean fire. They are the books, the arts, the academies that show, contain and nourish all the world, else none at all in aught proves excellent. Then he says, then fools you were, these women, to forswear. And so on. Because by then the men have realised they've made a big mistake. And the other deep thing about searching for truth is usually it starts in a kind of what's called a melancholy, the darkness that in tradition is symbolised by Saturn, darkness or melancholy. It's not the same as depression. Melancholy is you're there and you want to understand, you want to find out what the truth is, but you can't do it at the moment. You're kind of stuck in this melancholy. And it's brought up several times actually in the play, but the one I picked is one by Barone, when the deer hunting is going on. And Barone says, the king, he is hunting the deer. I am coursing myself. They have pitch to toil. I am toiling in the pitch that defiles. Defile, a foul word. Well, set thee down, sorrow, for so they say the fool said, and so say I, and I the fool, well proved wit. By the Lord, this love is as mad as Ajax. It kills sheep. It kills me. I am a sheep. Well proved again on my side. I will not love. If I do, hang me. In faith I will not. Oh, but her eye! By this light, but for her eye I would not love her. Yes, for her 2 eyes. Well, I do nothing in the world but lie and lie in my throat. By heaven I do love, and it hath taught me to rhyme and to be melancholy, and here is part of my rhyme, and here my melancholy. Well, she hath one of my sonnets already, the clown bore it, the fool sent it, and the lady hath it. Sweet clown, sweeter fool, sweetest lady. By the world I would not care a pin if the other 3 were in. Ah, here comes one with the paper. God give him grace to groan. He says it rather beautifully. Okay, well I'll stop there and pass on.